In this episode, we're going to talk about the 4 tools that you can use to teach your dog anything. And I mean anything.
Welcome to the Dog Guy Josh Show, a podcast about canine culture and lifestyle, hosted by Josh Pitts, a certified dog trainer.
What's up, everyone? It's your boy, Josh Pitts, aka Dog Guy Josh, aka Don't Call Me Late for Dinner. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the 4 main techniques that trainers use to teach their dogs any new behavior that they want. It's important to note that if you're teaching your dog a complex behavior, for example, how to get a beer from the fridge, that's not one single behavior. That's actually a behavior chain. And although we don't discuss that in this episode, these 4 methods will allow you to teach individual behaviors so that later, when your skills are better, you can chain them together for more complex tasks like that. Let's get started. So the 4 behaviors I want to teach you today are capturing, luring, targeting, and shaping. Capturing is marking a behavior the moment it occurs. This is the primary way that we teach all behaviors, by providing instant feedback the moment our dogs do something that we like. Think of it like taking a picture. You say cheese, everyone smiles, and then you click to take a photo, one that stays in your dog's mind to mark a memorable occasion. There are 2 ways you can capture behaviors. The first, which you already have, is a verbal marker such as yes or good. The great part about using our voice is that we always have it with us and it doesn't cost a thing. The bad part is that we, the humans, have to condition ourselves to use it. The tone of our voice can also change, and sometimes it's difficult to use our voice in loud settings. The second is a clicker, which is a mechanical noise-making device. And you can pick these up at most pet stores from anywhere from $1 to $10, depending on where you live. The great part about using a clicker is that the sound is discreet and therefore easily recognizable to the dog or the animal you're training. There was actually a study done by an animal behaviorist at a SPCA in Colorado, Lindsay Wood, and in that study, what they discovered was that behaviors that are trained with clickers are learned by dogs nearly twice as fast. The other cool thing about clickers is you can use what's called shaping, which we'll talk about later in this podcast. But shaping is a method to teach behaviors that works really well with a clicker and doesn't work so well with our voice. If you've ever wanted to teach complex tricks that don't always occur naturally, a clicker is great for teaching those types of things. For example, if you were going to use a lure and capture to teach spin, what happens is your dog actually becomes dependent on your hand signal in order to perform the behavior. Whereas if you use shaping, it's a lot easier to put the behavior on a verbal cue and gradually guide the dog to the behavior you want. The downside about using a clicker is you have to remember to take it with you. Sometimes in like group classes, or if you're working on loose leash walking or working with a reactive dog, some people find that it's kind of cumbersome to carry all this equipment. So if you have a leash in your hand and a clicker, and then you're trying to deliver treats in your other hand, it can be a little overwhelming for beginners. And in fact, that's how I came up with the idea for my clicker ring training tool, for those that are familiar with that. And you can learn more about that by heading over to clickerplus.com. The next teaching tool I want to talk about is luring. And luring is taking a piece of food and sort of waving it around in front of your dog's face and getting them to follow it as a guide. It's not really a bribe. And in fact, if you've never tried luring your dog into a sit or a down or something like that, I highly encourage you to do so. It's used with virtually any behavior you want to teach. And it's a great way to guide your dog into the behavior you're attempting to mark so that you can reinforce it. And you'll hear me use, marking, clicking, capturing. Those are all sort of interchangeable words for capturing that we just discussed. So a lure teaches your dog to follow, which allows you to guide him into any position without force. With your dog close to you, what you want to do is place a treat in your hand and close your hand just enough so that your dog can't get to it. Now take that hand, place it close to your dog's nose within about 1 to 3 inches and let your dog sniff it. When your dog becomes aware of the treat, you slowly want to move your hand around your dog's nose, about at their nose level, in a way that's going to get their head to turn or follow your hand by backing up, something like that. And the moment your dog, you only want to really do this a couple seconds, and then go ahead and mark the behavior. The moment your dog's nose is close to your moving hand, use capturing, say good or click, and then immediately open your hand and give them the food. If your dog's nose falls away from your hand, say not it and reintroduce your hand. If you need to, make the exercise a little easier for your dog so that they can be successful. The example of using not it is what trainers like to call a no reward marker, and sometimes that'll be abbreviated as NRM if you're reading dog training literature. And NRM isn't vital to training dogs, although it can be beneficial to develop it for using with more complex behaviors you're teaching, particularly when you cue your dog to produce a behavior and they produce a different behavior instead. It's sort of a way to give them verbal feedback that they didn't earn a reward for their response. Although personally, I feel the absence of a treat is enough and that you should worry more about capturing what it is you want instead. This is a much more faster and practical approach. Lastly, as I mentioned in the fluency section, you'll want to quickly fade the use of your lures once you get your dog responding to a verbal cue. So, for example, if you're teaching sit and you're taking the treat and you're rocking it back over their head, once your dog is sitting automatically, you don't really need your lure anymore. And you can start using your verbal cue instead. And then the very first time your dog does something, toss them a couple extra treats for responding to the verbal cue instead of your lure. Shaping. Have you ever wanted to teach a fun trick like bow, roll over, spin, something that doesn't always occur naturally or frequently? Shaping is a powerful tool in dog training to teach behaviors that we can't quickly and effectively teach with just our voice alone. To shape a behavior is to use capturing for successive approximations of a behavior until the target behavior is reached. You can think of it like playing the hot or cold game with your dog, gradually guiding them to the behavior you want. So for example, when I first learned shaping, I had to perform a spin or a bow for my dog trainer exam. And for spin, for example, I clicked my dog for just a head turn, and then I added some criteria. So I clicked him for a head turn plus a foot turn, and then I clicked them for moving, 90 degrees in one direction, and then I clicked them for a half turn, and then 3/4 of a turn, until eventually I got a full spin. And so that's an example of how you can teach a spin without having to do a lure. Shaping is a little bit complex at first, at least it was for me. But once I got it, shaping became my go-to method for training new behaviors and expanding the possibilities of what my dog knows. Although it's more challenging, the possibilities of what you can teach are endless. Shaping also doesn't rely on luring as much, which is sometimes called free shaping, which is great if you like to be lazy and just train your dog from your couch, like during commercials. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is targeting. Have you ever wondered how animals are trained for movies or certain service dog tasks? Targeting is training a dog to touch an object, such as a targeting stick or your own hand, so that you can get them to freely follow it and lead them anywhere you want them to go, instead of having to push, pull, lift, or coax. You can target a dog into a car, onto a grooming table, over jumps. Want to direct your own dog movie? Train your dog to touch a sticky note or a piece of tape and then hide it around the set. Hand targeting is one of my favorite and often least practiced behaviors by dog owners. When I teach recall in all of my private lessons and group classes, I start the first week by teaching people a hand target because it makes for a really fun game for the dog, and it gives the dog parent a way to call their dog without actually using their recall cue. And this also helps dogs socialize, particularly if they're shy and mouthy dogs. Once the dog can do hand targeting with you, or touch hand with you as it's usually called, then you can have strangers and guests and other people the dog knows, practice with them. And then that really helps shy dogs and fearful dogs overcome, for example, like when kids or strangers reach out their hand, dogs are much more okay with it because then they see that as a potential opportunity for a reward rather than something to be afraid of. So that's it. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of the types of teaching and learning techniques that dog trainers use in order to teach behaviors. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Dog Guy Josh Show with Josh Pitts. Like what you just heard? Tell your friends about DogGuyJosh.com and join us next time.